Hi, this video is going to look at a question about the economic environment. A few people have requested that I have a look at the economic environment. I'm going to give some statistics for this year, and I'm recording this in 2018. If you're watching this in the future, you will need to update the statistics because the economic environment moves very, very rapidly, and I would imagine even by 2019 a lot of the things that I'm talking about will no longer be the case. So hopefully this essay is useful to give you a bit of context, particularly for the 2018 exam. So these are the factors that you need to be aware of from the specification, and the question is: discuss the extent to which the economic environment in the UK is favourable for retailers at the moment. I'll just go through a few things with you. I've got information on all of these different factors. So starting with GDP, this is a chart that shows GDP growth in the UK. You can just about make out the years down there maybe, but you can see that from the headline particularly, the UK isn't growing particularly well in the first 3 months of 2018. Now, there are some reasons for that. The weather in the quarter wasn't particularly good, but nevertheless, economic analysts are interested to see whether this is a blip or if this is a sign that the economy is actually slowing. In terms of annual growth, these are the annual growth rates in recent years. You can see that the economy was averaging much higher growth rates before the financial crisis of 2008-2009 than it has managed to since. We've described this period since the global financial crisis as a very weak recovery, and fundamentally the economic environment in the UK has changed since before the crisis, and growth has not been as strong. In terms of taxation and fiscal policy, this shows government borrowing, and again you can see that it rocketed as a result of the global financial crisis. What happened was the government needed to borrow money to bail out banks. In fact, this excludes the banks' figures, but the government needed to borrow money to pay unemployment benefits and things like that, and they were collecting less tax because less profits were being made. And that meant the government had to borrow money to finance its spending, and the size of the deficit went up. And you can see that the size of the deficit has come back down, which arguably is good news because it means that the government may be able to cut taxes at some point in the future. It also means their program of austerity, where they have cut government spending, may be able to ease slightly. However, the current Chancellor of the Exchequer, Mr. Hammond, has kept the broad aim of the previous Chancellor of reducing the gap between spending and borrowing, although he has eased on the pace of cutbacks. What that's saying, basically, is that they want to get to a point where you're not borrowing money. The government needs to collect more in taxes than it's spending. So how do you do that? You raise taxes and you cut government spending, neither of which are particularly beneficial for the economy. So you could argue it's good news that the size of the deficit is coming down, but it's not great news yet because there's further cuts in government spending and tax rises potentially to come. However, having said that, the way that the government have chosen to reduce the size of the deficit is by cutting spending. And you can see here, these are the corporation tax rates in the UK, and the Conservative government has cut them. They're currently at a flat rate of 19% for corporation tax. That's down from, I think, about 23% in 2010. And they're going to continue to cut those corporation tax rates to about 17%. This is good news for UK businesses because it means they get to keep more of their profits. In terms of income tax, I won't go into huge detail, but the government have increased the personal allowance that you get tax-free up to £11,850. That should be good news for people on low incomes because it means they can earn more money without being taxed on it. So yeah, that's some stuff on income tax for you. In terms of the exchange rate, well, this is a chart showing the pound to euro exchange rate. The euro are our biggest, Eurozone partners are our biggest trading partner. And so you can see here that the value of the pound has fallen rather dramatically since 2016. Okay, so the value of the pound has fallen dramatically. This would tend to be good news if you are exporting goods, because people abroad can afford to buy more things from you. Okay, the value of the pound has fallen. People need to exchange fewer euros, for example, to buy pounds, and therefore your products basically become cheaper. However, it's not good news if you're importing, because the pound's lost value. So therefore, if you're buying products that are priced in euros, you need to exchange more pounds to buy them. So you can use spiced and Whipdeck to try and remember that. Weak pound, imports dear, exports cheap. So it's expensive to import, but it's cheap to export. So with all of these things about exchange rates, the exchange rate has two sides. What's the impact on exporters? What's the impact on importers? And this would tend to benefit exporters rather than importers, this downward trend. In terms of inflation, the government has a target for inflation of 2%, and in November 2017 we were a whole percentage point above that, over a percentage point above that, 3.1%, but you can see that inflation has gradually fallen. The main reason that we were above target was actually related to this exchange rate and what we're saying about imports becoming more expensive, but that's weakened somewhat. And inflation is now running at 2.4%, which is well within the government's target of 2% plus minus 1%. So they'll be relatively pleased that the inflation rate has come down. Why that's particularly good is this chart here, which shows how inflation compares to wage growth. So this blue line here is inflation, the red line is wage growth. Now, it's bad news whenever prices are rising more quickly than wages are rising. So if prices are rising more quickly than wages, it means basically people are getting poorer because they're having to spend more money because prices are going up and their wages aren't going up as quickly. Now, what's happened in recent months is that wages increased by 2.9% over the year, okay, while prices only went up by 2.7%. That means that wages are increasing faster than prices, which is good news because it means that people are better off. But you have a look at that, 2.9 minus 2.7, people are only 0.2% better off, so they're not massively better off, but it's definitely better to have wages growing faster than prices. Finally, on monetary policy, not quite finally, but on monetary policy, interest rates are at a record low of 0.5%. However, interest rates are fully expected to rise at some point during 2018. The most recent news is that because of Brexit, though, the Bank of England, Mark Carney, doesn't want to raise interest rates immediately because that would increase the cost of borrowing and increase the reward for saving, which would encourage consumers to spend less money. And he's saying, well, it's Brexit, because Brexit is causing a lack of confidence. We don't want to raise interest rates at the same time because that might put people off spending money. It could be bad for the economy. So that's what's going on with monetary policy at the moment. Interest rates are expected to rise, but the Bank of England reluctant to raise them too quickly because they don't want to kill consumer confidence. And finally, on trade and protectionism, the final thing that you need to know, well, This was just 2 hours ago, posted on the BBC website. I'm recording this on the 1st of June 2018, and Donald Trump is threatening, well, he's said that he's going to impose tariffs. Tariffs are a restriction on free trade and would be bad news for businesses around the world, really. So that's what's going on in terms of trade and protectionism. Really important to keep up with that, because there's an awful lot going on about trade and protectionism. And protectionism tends to be bad news for business. So that was quite a long introduction to this essay. I'm not imagining that this would be a case study that you'd get. This is stuff that you should be keeping up with the news and have at least an understanding of what's going on in the UK economic environment. So, as usual, I planned the essay before starting. I timed myself 22 minutes today, and I tried to type this up on the computer. I don't know how realistic that is. Maybe you should have a go at writing the essay as well. So here's how I went about answering the essay. There are a number of factors in the economic environment that may be favourable for retailers at the moment. So I'm trying to echo the question. The first factor is that the economy in the UK is growing, albeit the growth is currently slow. When the economy is growing, it tends to generate consumer confidence and encourage spending. Economic growth is correlated with low levels of unemployment, which the UK currently enjoys, with unemployment at 4.2%. This is at a time when inflation is rising and is well within the government's target, currently 2.4%, and real wages are rising. When unemployment is low, the economy is growing. When unemployment is low, the economy is growing and real wages are increasing. Consumers tend to increase their spending. Therefore, it is arguable that the retailers of income-elastic goods like luxury products may well feel the economic environment is favourable for them at the moment, as real incomes are rising, and therefore demand for their products should also rise. So this first paragraph focuses really on the good news in the economy, and I've linked that to income elasticity of demand when average wages are rising. So the economic environment obviously has a big impact on people's incomes. So analysing through the use of income elasticity of demand is the way to go on a question like this. Okay, so I've explained here why the basic economic statistics may show the UK economic environment is favourable. Now I need to evaluate that. However, the economic growth rate posted in Q1 of 2018 was the lowest since 2012 at just 0.1%, which is a very slow rate of growth. This could compound the worries that consumers and businesses already have about the impact of Brexit on the economy and reduce consumer confidence and therefore spending. It's supposed to be whilst employment is very low, anecdotal evidence suggests that many people are underemployed. This means that they are in work, but perhaps only in part-time work when they want to be in full-time work, therefore reducing the incomes some consumers have available. This is reflected in the very low rate of real wage growth. Wages are growing by 2.7%, whilst inflation is rising by 2.5%, meaning consumers are only marginally better off. Okay, so if you think about it, I've talked about economic growth in that first paragraph, and I've explained why it's not actually that good. I've looked at unemployment in that first paragraph, and then explained why it might not actually be so good. And I've looked at real wages in that first paragraph, and then explained why it might not actually be so good. In addition to this, the pound has fallen dramatically since the Brexit vote. Since many retailers import raw materials, this increases their cost and reduces their profit margins. This reflects the difficulties that many retailers have faced since the start of 2018, with brands such as Debenhams, Maplins and Toys R Us all either shutting down or announcing store closures because of falling profits. Okay, the retail environment is very, very challenging at the moment. Okay, it doesn't reflect a healthy economic environment, and these are many of the reasons why. Hopefully you can see how I've linked them to the first paragraph and then put in exchange rates as well. exchange rates in the context of retailers. All right, so now this next paragraph is going to look at the policies, and I was beginning to get a little bit concerned about time here. This took me quite a long time to write this first bit. In terms of policies, monetary policy is currently favourable to businesses as interest rates are very low and may encourage consumption of big ticket items like furniture or cars. Okay, so I'm looking at monetary policy, the very low interest rate of 0.5%. Fiscally, the government has reduced the size of the budget deficit, which may increase consumer confidence as tax cuts may be possible in the future. Indeed, corporation tax has already been reduced to 19%, which benefits retailers as they can keep more of their profits. However, so in this paragraph, I have up here, I've analysed in this paragraph the economic environment and evaluated in this paragraph. Because I was running out of time, I've done my analysis in the first half of the paragraph, and I've done however here, and looked at the reasons. I've basically tried to evaluate here in the second half of the paragraph. However, Mark Carney has indicated the interest rates are likely to rise at some point in 2018, which will reduce the disposable income consumers have and could prevent them from shopping in retailers. Philip Hammond also has indicated that he intends to cut the size of the deficit further, reducing the chance of further tax cuts. So maybe that should be a separate paragraph, but you can see that I've tried to analyse economic statistics, evaluate them, analyse policies that you need to be aware of, evaluate them, and hopefully I've managed to do that in the context of retailers, which is what the question is about. So what's my conclusion? In conclusion, the UK economy is performing relatively well despite the threat of Brexit, and consumers continue to require goods and services from retailers. However, consumer confidence is low and the outlook for economic performance is uncertain. Therefore, the most successful retailers will have a portfolio of products that include both normal goods, demand for which will increase if incomes rise, and inferior goods, demand for which will rise if incomes fall. The outlook for the economy is so uncertain, the retailers need to ensure their strategy is suitable for the impact of both economic growth or worsening economic performance in the UK. So what I've tried to do is provide some balance in this answer, and again I've gone back to income elasticity of demand. The UK economy performance is very questionable at the moment, and it could go either way, and so I've tried to reflect that in my answer. I suppose you could criticise my conclusion and say it's more focused on the future than at present, but hopefully I have managed to get across that at the moment part of the question in this opening sentence, in fact in these opening two sentences. Anyway, I hope that's helped clarify how I would approach a question on the economic environment.